Hello and welcome to Dungeons & Drawgans. This episode is the grand finale of the Ballad of the Mad King campaign series, and I cannot stress this enough. If you haven't already seen the previous videos, watch them before this one. The context is crucial to understanding this story and its intricacies. There will be a link in the description and on the screen now. Okay, when last we left our heroes, they had finally found what they were looking for and made their way through the sewers beneath Italis to enter the quarantined central city. Upon rising from the depths, the team discovered that the city had long been destroyed and its people killed by the same plague of beasts they'd hidden within the walls to avoid. Making their way to the castle at the city's center, our heroes found the throne room locked, and the keys needed to access it scattered, held by each of the important council members, representatives of each major race. Now they set out, in search of these council members, or what was left of them, in the ruined central city of Italis. But first, night was falling, and the team sought shelter. Aaron Bombastic, the monkey blood rager, split off from the group, deciding to sleep in the castle, while the others returned to the streets and made their way to a run-down armor shop. After clearing the place of monsters and barricading the doors, the team rested for the night, taking shifts to stay up and watch for any threats. In the night, a horde of roaming beasts did pass, but the party kept quiet and allowed them to leave. In the castle, meanwhile, Aaron found himself alone in some kind of kitchen. As the same horde of roaming beasts moved through the small confined rooms of the castle, Aaron awoke to the sound of them prancing towards his location. His first instinct was to hide. Looking around for a place, he flew up to the ceiling and remained there as the beasts began to go by. Several passed through his room before one suddenly stopped, sniffed the air, and looked up. Aaron knew that this was not a situation he wanted to be in. He quickly rushed out of the room, but the necromantic creatures were everywhere. Several bit and scratched him as he fled through the many rooms of the castle. With no idea where he was going, Aaron burst through door after door, every time finding himself in yet another confined space, until finally, as his heart pounded wildly and his lungs felt like they'd give out, he crashed back into the central hall of the castle. A familiar place at last. He'd gained a bit of a lead on the horde of ravenous monsters, but still had no time to lose. He pushed himself and ran out into the dark nighttime air of the town square, frantically looking for a place to take cover and a way to escape the beasts. He dove into the blood-filled fountain at the center of town. Quietly, as if stalking their prey, the beasts wandered back out onto the city streets, seemingly having lost sight of Aaron, who was holding his breath as best he could, submerged in bloody water. But the run had exhausted Aaron, and he could not maintain his hiding place. With a gasping breath, he popped back out of the water, alerting the beasts once more. This time he fled into the air, using his flight to his advantage. He landed on the roof of the building the party was in, and passed out, wet and bloody. The next morning, the party awoke, and Aaron rejoined them, though he smelled terrible, and his clothes were stained a deep red.
"What happened to you?"
asked Kalis. Aaron didn't want to talk about it, but as the discussion took place, the party noticed that Darnier was missing.
"Where's Darnier?"
asked Anya.
"I don't know,"
replied Sylvan.
"but this boss health bar on the bottom of the screen looks quite concerning."
While I haven't mentioned it yet, Sylvan had a tendency to break the fourth wall. It was true that while the party had been talking, Darnier had wandered off to the bar across the street, and, in his lust for booze, had inadvertently begun the first major boss encounter of the session. The rest of the party, hearing the commotion in the bar, quickly rushed in to find Darnier fighting a giant rat. Anya came prepared, having prepped her fire shield and other appropriate buff spells to cast when the beast went underground. The party defeated Lugner the rat without much difficulty, and collected the key and note he held.
"To whomever it may concern, I'm leaving this note here in the hopes that someone will find it and know what that bastard has done. Of all my transgressions, even I can't hold a candle to what the king has done to his people. I have no idea why he would do this or how he benefits from it, but I just know that he is responsible for the current plight on our world. How else would these monsters get inside the city walls? 10 years ago, these monsters pop up and start to terrorize the countryside. Perhaps the king was trying to force an alliance between the 5 major races. I don't know, for whatever reason he must have needed this city built. It scares me how little I actually know about how these events began. Then, 2 years ago, the king seals up the city because of some supposed threat to our security, and then suddenly the place is overrun. I'm not buying the king's bullshit. He barricaded himself into his castle and left all of us to be slaughtered by beasts. They even appeared to come from his castle. I don't know why he would do this, but clearly it's him. I can't give a reason why anyone would believe me after what I've done, but I have no reason to lie about this. Please, believe me. The king's behind this. Signed, Rapture.
Having collected the first key early in the day, and still having much daylight to burn, the party proceeded onwards towards the western district of the city. They would have to pass through the government buildings, like the town hall and school, in order to get to the residential district. While some of the beasts there posed them a challenge, none were particularly threatening, and the party made their way through to their next destination. As they crested the hill beyond the school, they found themselves staring out over a massive wasteland, where the residential district should have been. The entire district had been leveled, leaving nothing but fire and rubble, and a single house sitting at its center, seemingly untouched, save for a massive gaping hole in the roof. Cautiously, our heroes made their way towards the single standing abode, terrified of what they might find within. The barren, quiet expanse of destroyed homes was empty, and the silence sent a chill down their spine. But, without much difficulty, they reached the house and pushed their way in. Within the walls of the large home, things were much less undamaged. Furniture was thrown around, and many walls had been knocked down. Long, dried blood painted the walls everywhere, and bits of flesh and bones sat around the room, unrecognizable. The house, however, contained nothing more of interest. After looking around for some time, the party decided to continue onward towards their destination. In the distance sat the incredibly tall watchtower where Ballad, the gnome representative, was said to have fled. Kalis, Darnier, Anya, Aaron, Skrek, Jarira, Carla, and Sylvan trekked across the wasteland once more as they headed towards the tower. As they were nearly there, a huge pit made itself apparent that surrounded the entire tower and expanded hundreds of feet below the city. A long bridge connected the residential district to the tower that was their goal. The team crossed the bridge gradually, as the sun was starting to go down. The journey here had been a long walk, crossing most of the city in a single day, and as the party headed up the winding external stairs of the tower, they were preparing for a fight. Anya knew from her dream that a terrifying winged abomination was awaiting them at the top. As they were nearing the highest floor of the tower, the party heard the flapping of wings, but these were not the gigantic wings of the expected creature. They were those of harpies. The harpies stayed at a distance, knowing they weren't a physical threat, but sang a sweet song like sirens, entrancing the party. Most of them were able to resist it, but Skrek, the ratfolk barbarian, was not as strong-willed. Silently, he walked towards the harpies, ready to blindly plunge off the edge of the stairs. Sylvan the rogue called out and cast a spell on him, causing him to suddenly stop in his tracks. He had used Dominate Person, and now overwrote the harpies' wicked influence. Seeing that their plan had failed, the harpies merely cackled and left, leaving the party to continue their ascent up the steps. At the height of their climb, they entered the tower. On the side opposite of where they had entered, there stood a short cloaked figure, holding the worn cloth shut over his chest with one hand, and extending the other towards the party to signal them to stop. No, stay back! Stay back! He babbled. Aaron slowly stepped forward, trying to calm the man down, but he only seemed to get closer to the ledge, babbling incomprehensibly. Feathers began to sprout from his arms as he leaned back. Aaron rushed forward to try to stop him, but he was already gone over the edge of the tower. As Aaron reached the opposite end of the room, a gust of wind picked up as the massive bird rose up from below, nearly knocking the party over with the force of its wings. Ballad the bird now flew before them. The party quickly prepared for battle, as the bird flapped its wings once more, sending an even more powerful gust through the tower. Aaron was knocked back, barreling through the door to the tower and out into the open air. Luckily, his ability to fly saved him. Anya quickly cast Fly on Darnier, so that he could combat the huge feathered abomination. Darnier responded by picking up the small ratfolk barbarian, who was terrified and confused, and hurling him at the bird. Skrek was quickly shaken off, and started to fall, but was caught by Aaron. Kalis airwalked over and started to wail on the bird, as Anya casted constricting coils. For a moment the monster was paralyzed, and nearly fell to its doom, but it broke free of the spell in time to swoop up and continue its assault on the party. Together, Darnier and Kalis dealt damage to the beast, as Anya provided support, and Aaron set down the terrified ratfolk, Skrek. Sylvan sat back, unable to do much as he had no way to fly. He tried to shoot the creature with a crossbow, but it was not his best form of damage. In the end, it was Darnier that brought the thing down with a mighty swing of his battle axe. The bird plummeted down into the depths below the tower, disappearing into the darkness. It was then that the party realized they needed to collect its key, and Anya and Darnier flew down towards the bottom of the tower to find it. Kalis attempted to follow, but with only airwalk and not true flight, he was about half as quick. The others waited at the top. As Anya and Darnier neared the darkness below, there was a rumble. Then another, as a long, spider-like arm came out of the darkness and latched onto the tower. The beaked head of the bird was dragged up from the depths, as it had now sprouted arms and was climbing the tower. It reached up and nearly grabbed Anya out of the air, but she was able to move back. Darnier flew towards the tower and struck at a weak point in it with his axe. The creature attacked again, but Darnier simply kept hitting the tower, sundering its stone as he tried to crack it open like an egg. Atop the tower, the party had noticed the rumbling, and began to run down the long winding staircase before the thing would collapse. In a panic, Carla scooped up Skrek, and Aaron flew down to pick up Jarira and get clear of the now shaking tower. Sylvan turned the stairs to ice and started to slide down quickly as the tower began to tilt. Kalis had also noticed this, and tried to make his way back up to help. Darnier finally made a big enough hole in the wall to compromise the structural integrity of the tower, and as he and Anya got out of the way, it began to collapse, taking the massive monster down with it. The party made their way down safely, and landed on the other side of the huge pit. Anya, Darnier, Kalis, Aaron and Jarira, Carla and Skrek.
What the hell are you thinking?
Anya yelled at Darnier.
I was thinking I'd kill the monster.
Darnier responded.
Where's Sylvan?
Kalis asked Aaron. The silence was deafening. Anya and Kalis flew down into the pit to retrieve the key and search for Sylvan. They returned with a key and a note, but no rogue. Anya tried to resurrect Sylvan, and found that he was unable to come back. Sylvan was gone. After a time of mourning, Kalis read the next note.
Apologies for the hasty nature of this message, but I fear I may not have long to act. If this message is found by the king's men, it will likely never see the light of day. I have uncovered something. The truth is, the council has no real power. Sure, he pushes the remedial tasks of managing affairs and minor laws and tax collection to us, but the king's word overrules us all. I began to pry into the affairs of the palace, questioning the king about what our jobs actually were, and, well, I may have been careless with my words. The king seems to have realized that I caught on a bit too much to what he was doing. What he was doing. Why is that the choice? He doesn't leave us with a whole lot of say in the matters around the castle. He doesn't leave us with a whole lot of say in matters around the castle is swarmed by beasts. He's threatening me. I'm scared of what he may do if he finds this message, but I must take the chance to speak. Get the truth out. Get it out. I have to. No more. I have to get it out. What he was doing. What was he doing?
It was nighttime now, and the party was exhausted from a long day. Making their way into the church district of the city, they decided to settle down in a temple. Finding one that seemed somewhat safe, they started to board up the windows with the pews. As the party was preparing the place to sleep, Kalis saw a strange shadow moving along the roof of the church. It looked like a long, lanky arm with a hand at its end. Taking Darnier to investigate, they headed outside and looked up onto the roof. Neither of them could see anything, but Kalis heard a strange humming sound. The two followed the noise down a couple streets to a back alley.
Stay here. Make sure nothing comes out.
Kalis said. Darnier stayed back as Kalis entered the alley, finding first a chest. Kalis noticed the telltale signs of a mimic and attacked the chest, destroying it. He then moved further into the alley, where he encountered another humanoid monster, though this one was carrying a burlap sack. Kalis called for Darnier's help, and he engaged with it, but killed it before Darnier arrived. Darnier stepped into the alley, noticing a mundane chest that had been smashed, and the body of the monster Kalis had just killed.
Satisfied.
Darnier asked, weary and wanting to go to sleep. Still feeling somewhat unsafe, but unable to identify why, Kalis conceded, and returned to the church. The party closed up the entrance, and decided to rest for the night. Before morning, Darnier was awoken by the sound of humming. He heard it coming from outside, and followed it to an alley. Here it was dark, and the humming sounded closer. At a crossroads of alleys, there was a small campfire with two figures around it. One appeared to be the silhouette of Carla. The other was shrouded in darkness. Darnier felt a cold wind from behind him, and turned to see two ghastly shadows, one tall, one short. They mouthed something to him, but all was silent. Then, in the blink of an eye, it was suddenly daytime. He turned back to the place where he had seen the fire, to find it was nothing but the dying embers of something that had been there the night before. Back at the church, the party was just waking up to find Darnier and Carla missing. After a short search of the area, they encountered Darnier, who filled them in on what he'd seen. Together they formed a search party and scoured the area, but Carla was nowhere to be found. Strangely enough, they did encounter Tengu, wandering the streets in search of someone.
Tengu? What are you doing here?
I came here because I was suspicious of someone. I'd prefer not to say who, as I'm not sure yet, but I'm glad to find you guys here. Tengu had left Gorin behind for his own protection, and now joined the party. They agreed to split up. Skrek and Jarira would search for Carla, while the rest of the party continued their quest, by defeating the last of the council members turned beasts, in the old chapel. Entering the chapel, they encountered exactly what they expected. The fight was tough, and lasted a decent time, but thanks to Anya's prior knowledge, the team was not caught off guard by the second opponent, and with Tengu's help, defeating the larger of the two monsters was quick. What the team did not expect, however, was that when Zwerg fell, Air became infuriated, slashing rapidly and slipping past attacks dangerously quick. Eventually, however, the party defeated the two, and collected their keys, along with another note.
Dear Zwerg, if you're reading this, I'm either dead or have succumbed to the madness that lies within us all, and is brought out by that wretched sound, in which case I may as well be. I thought it best to document what I found in case I am to meet my untimely demise before you arrive. You were right, my brother. That the aforementioned halfling had asked me to look into is nothing but a liar and a thief. He's been stealing from the treasury and collecting taxes himself under false orders. What's more, I suspect that rat Bugden only obtained his position in the council by somehow breaking the system. I have no proof, of course. It's only a suspicion. Not that it matters much now. Status and power mean nothing when faced with death and the impending doom of the beasts that have overrun this kingdom seems not to escape. Even the king himself, I fear, will not be leaving the castle alive. He has barricaded himself in with only his most trusty guard. But eventually we will have to get out, or the monsters will find a way. It's becoming hard to concentrate on the page before me, the pain pulling in my chest. My vision will never see what the next shape. The end is near, my old friend. Please do not give up. You must go on, for my sake. It seems only fitting that my resting place be here in the walls of this chapel. which has become our regular meeting place. If you escape this place alive, perhaps many years from now, you could come to visit it once again. Yours truly, Eric.
The party reconvened with their allies, who had found their friend, though Carla had no memory of leaving the chapel. Somewhat shaken by recent events, Carla, Jarira, and Skrek decided to leave the city. Tengu volunteered to escort them back to safety, and said a goodbye to the party. Hesitantly, Carla asked Anya a favor. Anya agreed that, when all was said and done, she would use her spells to resurrect their dead party member, Gabriella. Now only Anya, Kalis, Darnier, and Aaron Bombastic remained. They made their way to the throne room, putting together the 5 keys they had gathered from Prince Skjold, Lugner the rat, Belest the bird, Air, and Zwerg. Together, they opened the huge stone door and stepped into the throne room. A massive, sprawling chamber sat before them. Pillars on either side held up walkways leading back behind the throne, which stood on a raised platform at the back of the room. Above them, moonlight streamed in from a huge hole in the ceiling. As they walked further into the room, the sound of distant flapping wings started to grow closer. A big whoosh as wind hit the chamber from above, and a gigantic rotting white dragon descended down before them, crashing down and letting out a loud roar. The room began an epic clash. Anya summoned an angel to fight the beast, while the others focused on dealing damage. Darnier ran to one of the pillars and started to hack at it. As the dragon was weakened, Darnier brought down the pillar on its head, nearly killing Aaron in the process. The loud crash brought the dragon down, and in a cloud of dust, it seemed it was no longer moving. The dust cleared, and the dragon was still down. As Kalis began to approach it, it shifted slightly, and then suddenly lifted its head, shaking off the debris with another ear-splitting screech. The party stood at the ready, preparing to fight once again, as a figure descended down from one of the balconies above. A tall kitsune, in a torn and tattered robe, black on the outside and red on the inside, dropped down with a cane, driving it into the skull of the dragon. At first, the party was confused, but upon closer inspection, the outfit the fox wore was Sylvan's. Only one difference. He was wearing a new necklace, a silver pendant on a chain that was once his brother's. Sylvan hopped off the head of the dragon, now revealing his true form to the party for the first time. The sounds of Sylvan landing on the stone floor of the throne room echoed through the halls, followed by a short silence. Then, from behind the party came the solemn sound of the strumming of a lute, and with it, a familiar voice. Oh, many years ago we were heroes, but then one day they came, the human armies marching, and drove us all away. They burned down our villages, set fire to our homes. No place on earth was safe again. We hid among the stones. Oh, but then came a hero named Caffen, the prophesied warrior bard, who'd slain the old king and his dragon, and now led the beasts in their charge. 5 fools found their way to the throne room, but alas, 2 years too late. With their swords they had struck the final blow, and sealed the old king's fate. I have to thank you. I had hoped it would be a human to end his evil existence, a fitting finish for a man so proud of his people, poetic, to be turned into what he hated most, and killed by his own kind. In case there was still any doubt, that beast is the old king, or rather, was. Still, I hope there was some small piece of him in there somewhere, such that he could see when I had him slaughter his own son. Now, what to do with you? In truth, I am indifferent. I've already won. But I suppose continuing to control this kingdom from within doesn't sound all that bad. And if I let you go, you might tell someone. So...
There's just one problem with your plan,
said Sylvan.
I'm not human.
Oh, but how you wish you were, Caffen replied. Why else would you hide your identity from your so-called friends? Caffen snapped his lute shut into its mace form, as 4 kobolds stepped out from either side of him. Now is the time to make your choice, dear Kalis, he continued. Stand by me, and face your friends in this fight, or die along with them. Kalis walked over slowly and quietly stood beside Caffen, who kept an eye on him, as they pressed a button on his weapon, and it began to play a twisted and corrupted-sounding version of his song. Kalis turned and tried to strike at him, but Caffen was not surprised. He stepped easily out of the way, and took flight on his wings, hovering above the battlefield. The song burrowed into the minds of the party and drove them slowly insane. They ganged up on the kobolds, eliminating 2 of them in one turn. The other 2 began to writhe painfully, grasping their heads, as they suddenly began transforming into giant monsters. Aaron pulled out his sack of unlabeled potions, and began mixing them together willy-nilly, as the others held off the beasts, and Kalis tried to take Caffen down. He managed to smash his instrument, but Caffen merely backed up and conjured another. Aaron tried to grab Caffen and feed him the bubbling mixture of potions, but unable to grapple him, he decided to drink it himself. The party watched as Aaron downed the volatile mixture of liquids. He grew double his size. He turned invisible, became immune to fire, and he died. Yeah. I honestly don't know what he was thinking, downing several mixed potions. After that anticlimactic moment, the rest of the party finished off Caffen, nearly going mad from his magical music. In the end, it was Kalis the Kingslayer who dealt the final blow. Now they were responsible for this world's future, having ended its current crisis, but no one yet knew what they'd done, or the fate of the entire central city of Italis. Thanks for watching this episode of Dungeons & Drawgans. If you enjoyed it, leave a like and subscribe for more. Feel free to comment your own D&D stories down below. And come follow my Twitter, @DungeonsAndDraw, where I give updates, interact with fans, and even let you vote on what story I tell next.